What is going on, everyone? Thank you again for tuning in for the second week of Bring Your A Game. My name is Austin. You can follow me on Twitter, Austin Snyder, 90 AUSTIN SNYDER. Make sure to get involved in the conversation that route. Thank you, everybody who tuned in and commented and just got engaged in the last video. We are super happy to come out here again. Again, my name is Austin, and this is the homie.
What's up? This is Amar Burton. You could follow me at Amar_206 on Twitter and on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook. It's week 2. Week 1 went real well. We're looking forward to, just putting out another banger this week. So, yeah, let's go.
Hell yeah, it is. It's going to be a good one. There is a lot to cover, a lot of really amazing things, especially with the NBA Finals going on. So those of you who are watching this video right now, it is Wednesday. Okay, so hopefully this video should be going up very, very soon, but some of this content as far as the NBA Finals might be a little bit dated, so just keep that in mind. I'm sure we will have a winner here very, very soon in the Finals. Have you been enjoying the Finals, Amar? What do you think with everything that's going on?
I think the series in general, I think has been more competitive than a lot of people thought it was going to be. I mean, especially after the first 2 games, it was just like, okay, this is going to be a rout. Miami can't mess with LA. It just seemed like it was going to be 4 straight blowouts, and fortunately, Miami stepped up in game 3. Miami lost, but it was close. It went down to the wire. So. Right. That's better than a lot of people predicted or hoped for this series. So, so I think, it's been entertaining to watch outside of those first 2 games. Like the last 2 have been entertaining to watch. And then game 5, I believe, is coming up on Friday. So, yeah, we might have a new NBA champion by the weekend. If not, it could go 6, could go 7. Like, we'll see.
Yeah. Personally, I've had Lakers in 6 from the start. So, it absolutely is something that we very well could see happen. Or it'll end in 5. At this point, I think it'll end in 5. It just seems like such the typical storyline. You've got this Lakers team that is so dominant, right? AD and LeBron are both playing out of their mind, and then you have Jimmy Butler show up in an otherworldly performance. One game. And then we kind of just fall back into the routine. You know what I mean? So right. It's like almost like it's, I'll tell you, the people who truly believe the NBA is fixed, they'll always call on to that story, and that, history does tend to repeat itself, guys. So it's not scripted in that manner like you might think. But that does bring up a really, really good question. Since how this finals itself it's been somewhat competitive, but maybe not quite as much competitive as competitive as we hoped it would be. The real competition that a lot of people are looking at are finals MVP. It's kind of LeBron versus AD. I've heard a little bit of chatter of, LeBron was icing AD out. He won't give him the ball. He don't want him to have the ball because he needs to get this finals MVP. Even people are trying to do all the reading lips, and it's nuts, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, do you see any truth to that? And what do you think? Who do you think wins it right now?
I think the whole idea that LeBron would sacrifice the chance at winning of winning the series to increase his chance of winning finals MVP is like ridiculous. Like, I think LeBron, I think LeBron does care about winning finals MVP.
100%.
I think Anthony Davis cares about winning finals MVP.
1,000%.
I think Kyle Kuzma cares about winning finals MVP. Like, if you're a competitor at this level, you want that accolade. So I think both LeBron and AD care. I don't think it's that big of a deal. The idea that LeBron wasn't passing AD the ball because he's wanted to score. If you saw at the end of game 4 and AD hit that 3 that was kind of like the dagger. Yeah. Watch LeBron's reaction. Like, does that seem like somebody who was like, oh, damn, like he hit that shot, that's going to give him more of a one-up on finals MVP? he doesn't care on that level. I think the most important thing to LeBron and to AD is the individual award, which is natural. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think they care more about winning the series. And LeBron knows, more than anyone that it's more important for his legacy to get the 4th championship and to get the 5th and to, get a 6th eventually.
Oh, absolutely.
Then if he gets, 4 championships with 3 finals MVPs, that's, you can say, okay, well, Jordan won 6 and 6, but, Magic got 5 championships. He didn't always win finals MVP. Bird didn't always win finals MVP. Like Duncan didn't always win finals MVP. Kobe didn't always win finals MVP. So I don't think that is as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. And between the two of them, as far as like who do I think is going to win, it's tough because numbers wise, LeBron's the pick, right? He's after 4 games, he's leading the team in points, rebounds, and assists.
Yeah, I think he's damn near got a triple double again in the finals or whatever. Very, very close.
Yeah. The best case for AD, I think, is actually game 3, because you can look at it like, okay, when AD played bad, they lost, right? So your argument is, okay, well, he's more important to what they do because, LeBron could play bad because he had the first half in game 4 for LeBron wasn't good. There are parts of game 1 where he wasn't good. So you could make the argument that LeBron can play, average, mediocre, and they can still win. But if AD is not great, they lose. And that might be your best AD argument. Plus, you could throw in AD's defense. If they win game 5, it'll come down just who had the best game 5. Who hits the dagger, who has the most points in that game, or the best stat line in that game. So right now, still up in the air, I'd say.
I'm kind of right there with you. I think LeBron does have the slight edge just for the pure fact of the numbers. And the numbers mean a lot. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, there are certain storylines, such as you mentioned, the fact that AD was bad and the team loses. There's things to look at in that regard that play heavily into it. But, like, at the end of the day, the media, the people who vote on this, the people who make this award, who choose the winner of this award, they look at the numbers just like everybody else, and they'll see a damn near triple double. You know what I mean? They'll see very, very incredible performances just throughout the playoffs, throughout the final series in whole. And I think they'll look at that game 3, and yes, the fact that they lost and AD played bad will kind of score a point for him. I think also when you consider what LeBron did in that series, it works a bit in his favor. So you're right. It is very much up in the air. I think when you have such a close tie that goes on there, it comes down to the numbers, and a lot of it is who's got the prettier looking numbers. And people gobble up that triple double. You know what I mean? So they'll see that he's at least close to that, and that's it. That's just kind of all she wrote as far as that goes. Now that does it moves me into our next point, which I kind of I love this topic in itself because there's just a lot of things about the NBA that they don't make sense to me. You know what I mean? Like when you compare it to what goes on with other sports, there's a ton of things about the NBA that just they're very odd. And Finals MVP, being one of them. Finals MVP is an incredibly legit, that's a part of the argument for GOAT, for Hall of Fame status, for all of these things. It's a very, very important award to a player's legacy. Personally, I think that's just because there's so much emphasis put on the playoffs as a whole, right? But a Finals MVP is almost more valuable than a regular season MVP, right?
Right.
So why is it that the Finals MVP means so much more than Super Bowl MVP or World Series MVP? Look at Marcus Smith. Malcolm Smith.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Exactly. Don't even remember his name.
Exactly. And I'm
you're the biggest Seahawks fan in the world. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Die hard. And so, Malcolm Smith, Deion Branch. There's a slew of people that you could go back 50 years And it wasn't always the Russell Wilsons, the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady's, guys like that were winning these awards. It was very much pedestrian players who ended up stepping up in the biggest moment. But when you look back at a career, I mean, I guess when you're talking about Tom Brady, you're like, yeah, he's got some of these but it's really like the regular season MVPs, the wins, and the Super Bowl trophy itself. Like the Super Bowl MVPs are kind of like a little cherry on top. They don't mean a whole ton. So why is that though, Amar? I mean, why is there so much emphasis put into the NBA Finals MVP? But I mean, even with the World Series, I mean, I guess maybe a little more than football. But man, look at Andre Iguodala. The guy is like, that's his legacy, is winning a Finals MVP. Even more so than the rings. So give me your take. Let me know why you think what are the differences there.
I would say because I was inclined to say, okay, well, with the Super Bowl, it's one game, right? It's a series, and so who wins MVP can be a little more like fluky. Kind of like Malcolm Smith. I mean, that Seahawks Super Bowl performance, it was like across the board dominant. And I think Smith had you could point to, okay, the defense, was a big factor in that game. He was the defensive playmaker in the sense of, I think he had
cracks me up about that? I don't mean to cut you off, but it makes me laugh because do you ever play Madden at all? So what cracks me up about Madden is if you get a defensive player that has any kind of pick six or fumble return for a touchdown, whether in the Super Bowl or just they're either player of the game always, or they end up as the Super Bowl MVP in the video game. And it just almost seems like that was, kind of much of what you were alluding to is the defense was so great. And they're like, well, he scored a touchdown. So,
Yeah, it's like you can win Super Bowl MVP off of one play. Maybe one or two plays over the course of the game. And, as we know in football, it's like anyone can make that play. It's not with basketball, the narrative is that one player can dominate more. He could have more of a hand in his team winning or losing. And I think that's why
the team in a sense.
And that's why even with championships, why we put so much more emphasis on it with basketball than with baseball. Barry Bonds, a lot of people think he's the greatest baseball player of all time. He doesn't have a World Series ring. If he was a basketball player, there's no way he could be in the GOAT argument without at least one ring, right?
Right.
If not two or three or four or five or six. And the thought there is that, well, a baseball player can't, and we talked about this with Mike Trout last week. A baseball player can't impose his will on a game or a series and win that series for his team, whereas we think a basketball player can. And a football player, maybe if it's a quarterback or a running back in a run-heavy offense, but you still got to play defense. You know what I mean? So,
right.
So I think that's the difference in, why more often the best player on the basketball team wins MVP versus in the World Series or the Super Bowl. It could just be a guy on the team that just happens to have a great game or a really great series.
Well, and you'll notice too, even guys like that, I mean, you definitely see a bit of a rise in their expectations, Malcolm Smith, perfect example. Deion Branch even is a perfect example. He wins that Super Bowl MVP, and then he goes into free agency. I believe it was that very next season. Yeah, it was that very next off season. And then the Seahawks sign him. Right? Didn't they sign him or traded for him? I believe they signed him.
They signed him right after that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I could be wrong, so feel free to fact check me on that. But he got this big money contract, and he was being alluded to as an up and coming, soon to possibly be elite wide receiver. And Malcolm Smith, I guess nobody saw him as man, this guy's going to be a starter and really make big noise in the league. But it definitely came to a point where it's this is a very talented player that could do some good on your team instead of being just an afterthought,
Right.
Because he was also the guy that caught the Richard Sherman tip in the end zone when they beat the 49ers to go to that Super Bowl. So we had quite a bit of hype around him, and then he performed again. And I think it's definitely turned into a very fruitful career for him, and you could even say that MVP is a reason for it. And I'm sure the hard work and everything he puts into it plays heavily too, but that does bring up the question, because we have we have talked about, how important NBA the Finals MVP is, and I think you're right when you're alluding to the series as a whole. It plays huge in that sustained play of greatness, right?
Mhm.
So, do you think that the lack of Finals MVPs, despite the back-to-back Finals MVP and the only unanimous MVP in NBA history, but do you think the lack of those Finals MVP is the reason why Steph Curry isn't the face of the NBA?
Yeah, well, I think it's part of it. I think that if Curry had, really put his stamp on one of those 3 championships to the level
Right.
where he got Finals MVP, then you might have kind of coronated him as the face of the league. And it's weird because I think 2016, when they won, the 73 games, he was unanimous league MVP. He led the league in scoring. He really blew up mainstream. And I would have argued at that point.
Huge, dude. His wife started a career on TV.
Right.
And I mean, oh, God, became a super duper star.
Yeah. And I'd say before the finals started, he was like right there to where he could have overtaken LeBron as the face of the NBA, as the face of basketball. And
he had the perfect image too. That that clean, wholesome. I mean, just a lot like LeBron, where you don't really ever hear negative about him in the media unless it's somebody talking about whether they do or don't like the game. But like that was the guy to kind of take the keys from LeBron in that sense, because he just he has like, say what you want about LeBron on the court, but off the court the guy has been like, the NBA couldn't ask for a better face of the league, honestly.
Right.
Honestly, he he makes maybe some poor decisions on the court and maybe he whines a bit too much. I agree with some of those things, you know what I mean? But in terms of the dominant, elite, physical player, the guy's, again, in that conversation for GOAT. Not the GOAT, but in the conversation. And in terms of what he does and the point he makes for his brand and his off-the-court, stuff, starting the schools, I mean, all of those things, like, the NBA couldn't be happier, right? Like, that's the guy that, he's not out beating women, cheating on his wife. He's not out doing, getting caught with drugs in his car, picking up DUI. I mean, none of this stuff. And I'm not throwing shade at any one particular player throughout the history of the league that maybe has done some of those things. I'm honestly not. I'm just saying, like, so if you got a guy who's set that example for so long, Steph Curry would have been perfect, dude. He's a Christian man, very, humble and conservative in a sense, is out to help others. His wife has the Martha Stewart thing going on. I mean, like, it's perfect. It's that wholesome family. Your kids can look up to him and the husband can admire him. You know what I mean?
And that's why I thought it was kind of strange when people accused the league of like rigging the 2016 finals for LeBron. And I'm like, why wouldn't the NBA want Steph Curry to be the guy at the forefront of the league? You look at Steph Curry, and like you said, he's got, even more than LeBron, I think, has like everything you want in terms of marketability. He's got the thing, like LeBron is like this, big, physical freak athlete. Steph Curry is like the average guy. You know what I mean? I mean, he's, he's taller than like, me, but, he on the court against all those other guys, he looks normal, that's the appeal that like Steve Nash had, right? Is he's not like crazy athletic. He's not hella muscular. Like he's got that appeal to like everybody, he's appeals to, kids, to old people, like across races, across, economic backgrounds. Like, and like you said, like his wife was, she's becoming like a low key celebrity. He plays in this major media market. His game, like his style of play, is very fan friendly, very casual fan friendly. And you can see his impact on, young people and kids that play the game. It's like, shooting threes and step backs and all that became more popular, with the rise of Steph Curry. So controversial political stands, or, like LeBron has alienated the red right side of the country, right?
Right.
Steph Curry, I think Steph Curry, he kind of went up against Trump like once, but for the most part, I think he's got even more of like an inclusive appeal.
Right.
And so you would think, if the NBA wants anyone to be the next guy, it's Curry, and they have this opportunity if they wanted to rig it and fix it to usher LeBron out as he's getting older and turn the focus. I think it'd be Steph Curry. Now I don't think they rigged the series because that's just kind of stupid.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and but it's just weird. And I know, last season he got injured and everything, but it's just like, I think he should be right there as a face of the league, and he is promoted as like one of them. But yes,
he's in Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, he's a Hall of Fame personality that they definitely can lean on when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, by no means is he like the face of the league. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like if you see a poster, you see LeBron, and then you see, the guy like Giannis, Steph Curry, kind of the guys behind. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. When people, kind of your mainstream casual, even like a non-sports fan, when they talk basketball, they either say LeBron or Jordan,
right?
And it could be Steph Curry. You would think it should be Steph Curry, but yeah, maybe it's that not having a Finals MVP, not really in the 3 championships they won. I mean, the story of the first one was more all those guys in Cleveland getting hurt and LeBron trying to do it himself, and they got in his way. That was kind of more. I mean, like LeBron won was the SB for best championship performance that year, and they lost the series. So the story of that series was LeBron trying to overcome, and Golden State stopped him.
Just 2017 short,
right? And then 2017 and 2018 it was Kevin Durant, and so Steph Curry kind of missed his window to take that number 1 spot. And I mean, he's got time to do it again. I think they're going to be a contender next year, assuming everyone's healthy. So it could still happen. It's just weird that it hasn't yet.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that. He's young enough, and he's got like the he's got all the right things, I guess you could say, that a league would look to, when it comes to that. It just any league, it doesn't matter. It really comes down to the fact that you want a guy that's going to have that clean, that is going to be inclusive, that it's business, and that's how you're going to sell tickets and jerseys, is by having that right face of the league, and if you can have a guy that's even better than LeBron in that, it does nothing but help the league, which honestly, it's not on our docket here. Oh, you know what? We got to save that for starting 5. I forgot, because I did have a question about that. Well, I will ask it. What do you think about is LeBron James' time to shine, or time is is this coming to the end? Could maybe AD take that role over, or does Giannis become that guy? Does Steph Curry take a step when he comes back fully healthy and makes a run at the playoffs next season? Is he the guy? And the reason I ask this is the constant story is the low ratings for the NBA Finals, which I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's with football, and there's a lot of early bubble chatters that hey, once football season comes, watch the ratings tank. But does it have anything to do with people are just tired of? Are they done with LeBron? Are they tired of the storyline? Do they not? Is it just not interesting anymore?
There could be like a LeBron fatigue factor. We haven't really seen this before, where a guy has been at this high level with this much hype every year for 17 years.
It's nuts, dude. Almost
like even with Michael Jordan, I mean, he had those breaks of retirement during his career. And so it wasn't, he played 15 years in the league, but it wasn't like a straight 15 years of all hype. And even rookie Jordan didn't get the hype of like rookie LeBron, right? Of high school LeBron. Kobe's reign as kind of like the top guy on a contending team was actually relatively short, because you got the period where he was with Shaq, and then that period where the Lakers were bad with him. And so, yeah, it's like we haven't really seen this level of like this much hype, this much attention, this much success of an NBA player for so long. So yeah, it could be people are a little tired of LeBron. You know, they want to see new challengers and new, you know, people as like kind of the face. I think that's why it's like every year people are so quick to be like, okay, like Giannis is the guy now. Okay, Kawhi's the guy now. Okay, you know, Curry or Durant or, you know, Luka or whoever. Like they want someone to unseat LeBron. And it just hasn't happened yet.
So do you think that Kyrie and Durant have the same thought process on the face of the NBA that they do on their coaching staff? Or?
Like it, which I think it can actually be like you can have multiple guys if you market it right. Multiple guys who are like the face of the league. Now Kyrie Irving's not going to be one of them. Like Kevin Durant can be,
right.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it could. And I was throwing a little joke there.
All right, so and you know, another thing with LeBron is like I think that the two of us are, you know, we're old enough to where like we've seen his entire career develop.
Oh yeah,
from high school
start to finish.
Right, to deep into the NBA. And it's like
I remember like reading the Sports Illustrated magazines that like were talking about him and Melo both coming out of high school and like, you know, who's going to be the guy? Who's going to end up being the best of the two or whatever?
Yeah, like I remember when he came onto the scene, and I think when the one that kind of made him a national story was like when he took down Lenny Cook at that high school camp. I remember when Lenny Cook was getting the hype. So it was like, I'm that old. Right. And it just made me think like, every day it seems in my age, something happens in sports that makes me just be like, dang, I'm old. Like I'm so old. Like the other day I saw, Dikembe Mutombo's son, Ryan, he committed to Georgetown. Right. And I'm like, wait, hold up. Like, I remember when Dikembe Mutombo was like a freshman in college, and now his son is going to Georgetown. Like, and so it just made me wonder, like, what is like maybe the most recent or, you know, most memorable sports moment or sports story that just made you feel your age?
So I don't, you know, honestly, I can't tell you maybe the exact story or sports moment itself. But the one thing that always makes me feel old is seeing Ken Griffey Jr. and Ichiro Suzuki. Mm-hmm. So that right there in itself, seeing them, that always like, especially Ichiro's he's just about a full white head. Griffey's put on a good handful of pounds, those kind of things. And man, I just remember, you know, when I was younger and just a wee kid growing up before I even became a teenager or whatever, that was who I watched. That was like, those were the guys that like you actually tuned into the baseball games every single night. And we watched Ken Griffey Jr. belting home runs and killing it in center field. And I remember when Ichiro very first got to the Mariners, and like it was such a big story. Mm-hmm. And it was like, and I wasn't even like a big, even now I don't follow baseball super closely. Like I follow it close enough to kind of, you know, the big names in the World Series, et cetera, et cetera. But then it was daily, dude. That's what I was surrounded with, was nothing but baseball, all Mariners. Ichiro Suzuki's here. Look what he's doing. You know, I mean, just everything, you know. And then I see him now, and I mean, he's old. He's got gray hair. He's got, you know, it's just, I'm like, golly, man, like if he's that old, that means I'm getting that much older. And holy cow, it's supposed to be like, not only that, but seeing Sue Bird win another championship, you know, that kind of, I was like, man, she's getting old, you know, just spent so many years in Seattle, in the WNBA, winning rings. I mean, yeah, it's just amazing. What about you though, Omar?
I think it's always like when the kids of athletes that I grew up watching, when they get to the pros, that's always one, you know, Tim Hardaway Jr. or, you know, it's just like, okay, like not only do I remember Tim Hardaway, like I remember Tim Hardaway, he was, you know, and his son's in the NBA now. Like that makes you feel old. Like you said,
especially in basketball, because these guys go in, I mean, they're 18, 19 years old.
Yeah. And then like what you said, like with Griffey and Ichiro, like watching guys age, I been following this whole like Mike Tyson, Roy Jones possible exhibition fight that's going to happen. And just whenever they say how old Mike Tyson is, like he's 53 or 54,
you're like,
he is. And I'm like, right. Because I remember when Mike Tyson when he became like the youngest heavyweight champion ever. He was like 20 years old. I remember watching him fight at 20. And now I'm watching him spar and he's 53. I'm just like, what? Like, where did the time go? Like, what? So
you lose it.
Yeah, it's just like I saw his whole career happen, and now he's like, old. Like he's an old guy. He's gray hair and everything.
He is old. He's old, man.
Like it's just that's nuts, and it's like it's just makes me feel like I'm 100 years old.
Because we age with them. We age at the same rate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
and I've got this, and I've got this thing like when I wear jerseys. Like I don't know, I kind of remember. Well, okay, I don't like wearing the jersey of someone who's younger than me.
Right.
I remember when it occurred to me because it was when Carmelo and LeBron that year they came in the league, and that baby blue Nuggets Carmelo jersey I thought was like dope. I was like, yo, that's like a dope jersey. And then I was like, yeah, but like this dude's like 19 and I'm like, what was it? I'm like 20, like I don't know, early 20s or whatever. I'm just like, that's kind of weird, like wearing the jersey of this guy that's like younger than me, And like ever since then, I've just been like, I can't do it, And
my best friend Devin and I have always joked about that. Like, man, we look up to like 23-year-olds. Like our heroes are like 20, 22, and 23-year-olds.
Yeah, and so it really limits like the number of jerseys I can get. Because like the older I get, it's like I can't get any active players anymore. It's all like retired.
Got to look for all the retro shit.
Right? Yeah. So speaking of age and young athletes, one of the big stories that kind of came down today is Dwayne Haskins, the Washington football team quarterback. He's 23 years old. I believe second year in the league. Just real young in the game, just getting started. He's been benched. They're going to bench him. They're going to start Kyle Allen, and they actually moved Haskins down to number 3 on the depth chart. And I'm reading the stories about Haskins and some of the numbers on him, and it was like, he was, either last or near the bottom for quarterbacks for starting quarterbacks as far as like completion percentage and some other stats. And so it made me think, and this is kind of a good setup, I think, for our Sports 101 segment with Austin, where our analytical schematic sports expert over here is going to break things down for you, kind of get into more like the nitty gritty of the game, the X's and O's, the nuts and bolts, the stuff that, your casual fan, maybe can't articulate as well. So for this Sports 101, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the most important single statistic for a quarterback and why?
That's actually a great question, and it shines a lot of light on the recent news that we have heard with Dwayne Haskins. Now, to me, the single most important stat for a quarterback in the league is QBR. Now, a lot of people get QBR mixed up with passer rating. Now, here's the key difference between passer rating and QBR. Now, what a passer rating is it's a rating that tops out, that goes from, what is it? I think the lowest you can get, can you get a 0? Gosh, I don't think you can get a complete 0. Maybe damn close.
Then you can't get a 0.
Right, exactly. So if you have any kind of stat accrued, you cannot get a 0. That's what I thought. So anyways, all the way up to 158.3. That's your topped out perfect passer rating. Now where it's a bit skewed is that passer rating is just the stats. It's only the numbers. How many yards, how many completions to attempts, how many touchdowns to interceptions, right? So a guy who goes 25 for 28 for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, he just had a perfect passer rating, right? Now the problem with passer rating is it doesn't account for certain things, right? It doesn't account for the efficiency of the quarterback, what those numbers meant, right? Like how fruitful they were. So, the perfect example of it was, 2 weeks ago when Seattle played Dallas? Dak Prescott throws a freaking bullet to Trey Flowers' chest, as if Trey Flowers, the defensive back for the Seattle Seahawks, was wearing a Cowboys jersey. Now it bounces off of Trey Flowers' chest as he slides down to kind of catch it. Bounces off his chest. He kicks it off of and then he kicks it in the air to try and keep it up to grab the interception. And then what happens? CeeDee Lamb grabs it and then runs up field for like another 15 yards. Now, passer rating doesn't account for that. All passer rating shows is that Dak Prescott completed a pass for the 27 yards, etc., right? And so it looks super duper strong. Now, where quarterback rating becomes the very, very, very most important single statistic for a quarterback is it accrues all of the little stuff around it, right? Mm. So a quarterback rating goes from 0 to 100. That's your scale. Okay. Now, what the quarterback rating does is it adds context to it. And that's what's key, is the context of it, right? So completing a pass for 5 yards, yes, that will help improve your quarterback rating, but not all 5 yards are the same, right? So if I complete a pass for 5 yards and it is 1st and 10, holds a little bit higher regard than if I complete a pass for 5 yards and it was 3rd and 10, right? Because that 5 yards, if it's 3rd and 10, I needed that first down. So now what quarterback rating does is it includes everybody's play, including the offensive line's play. It includes the wide receivers play, the running backs play, and again, it includes the context of each play that all goes in to decipher. Now, how does it do it? It uses what's called an EPA. That's an estimated points average. Now, per scenario, per situation, and keep in mind, folks, this game has been around for 100 years, and so there's millions and millions of hours of analytics and all these things just on the last 20 of them that can be done to calculate these kind of things. I just want you to keep in mind, because it's guys way smarter than me that do this. Anyways, per that calculation, obviously it differentiates each situation and scenario, right? A 3rd and 10. Now, say on a 3rd and 10, the protection breaks down, right? So a 3rd and 10, and I'm just making up a number here, okay? I want people to, because again, I want to break this down in the most elementary form that I can, and I didn't do my homework on it. Anyways, on a 3rd and 10, let's say that your EPA is 5 points, right? That if you complete your 3rd and 10 with and the pass rushing is the pass blocking is good, the receivers are on their routes as they're supposed to, the running back does his chip block out route like he's supposed to, that's worth 5 points or whatever, right? Now let's say that your pass blocking breaks down. Okay. And then much like Russell Wilson, we see all the time. And now all of a sudden he's got to scramble backwards 15 yards, right? And then he has to juke a guy, break a sack and break out of a sack and then rush up the field at 10 yards to throw the ball and complete that 3rd yard and throw the ball for just a 10-yard completion for a first down. Right now, right. Your EPA says that as long as everything goes according to plan, that's a value of 5 points, right? Well, now when you include he made a tackle or miss, he broke a sack, the pass blocking was poor, okay, and he had to rush back and forward for a total of 30 yards just to make a 10-yard play. Well, now that 5 points becomes worth 7. Right? So it adds the context of what actually happened. Just like, let's say the pass blocking doesn't break down, right? And Russell Wilson just kind of gets a little jittery and he doesn't know where to throw it because maybe his receivers aren't getting open, whatever the case, and he rolls directly into a defender. Well, now that hurts his quarterback rating or his QBR because everybody else did their job but him. Right. So it's the single greatest statistic to understand efficiency and to understand context of the game. That's why a lot of the times, and this stat used to drive me nuts. I used to think it was absolutely ridiculous. I was a passer rating guy. That's the go-to. But the problem and the reason it would drive me nuts is because I like Matt Hasselbeck, for instance. He had a lot of games where he'd throw 400 yards, and this was the post Sean Alexander era, where he would throw 350, 400 yards and 3 touchdowns and maybe an interception, but his passer rating looked incredible, but his QBR, and this was when it was first kind of introduced, they've changed it up a little bit. So like they used to attach points for if it's like a clutch situation, right? If it's a quote unquote clutch, that means that it's like automatically 2 points higher than it should be or whatever the case. Now they've changed that. They've gotten rid of that. But they've still kept the context in there that, if I throw a Hail Mary for 50 yards and it gets intercepted, it doesn't affect my quarterback rating as much as say it's, in the third quarter and I do it right. Anyways, so I hated it because Matt Hasselbeck's QBRs were not always that great. And because he did make a lot of risky throws, we want the ball and we're going to score. Everybody knows it, right?
Yeah.
So, but then I'd see some of these other guys that would put up these numbers and these ridiculous numbers that didn't come close to passing yards, that didn't come close to touchdowns, whatever. You get guys like Byron Leftwich or whatever, and they'd have like these higher, and again, I'm pulling names out of my ass at this point, but they'd have these higher quarterback ratings, and it would frustrate me. Well, they were just more efficient. So again, to kind of summarize it all, the single greatest measure of a quarterback is QBR, quarterback rating, because it will add context to every play, because it is a true barometer of greatness from not so greatness, and it's a key telling stat to tell you exactly why Dwayne Haskins went from 1 all the way to number 3. The reason being is because he's last in the league with a 30.6. Nick Mullins, who got pulled halfway through his last start because he played so incredibly bad, which I didn't think it was that bad, but I agreed with pulling him, is 9 points higher at 39.1. Now, again, this is – I've had some people say – like, man, why wouldn't they keep him in? Just give him the year, It's not like there was any expectation. It's not like they planned on doing anything. Give him the year. Here's the problem. When you have a 9-point drop-off like that, an average quarterback, an average starting quarterback, so your guys like Teddy Bridgewater, your guys like, who would you say? Mitch Trubisky to a degree. Your guys like Jared Goff. They're guys that like are franchise starting quarterbacks, but they're not the Russell Wilsons, the Pat Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, the Jared Allens, etc. Your bar set there is 50. A 50 QBR is an average quarterback, and you are 20.6 points below that. A Pro Bowl quarterback is 75 or higher. So guys like Aaron Rodgers, who leads the league at 92.8. Patrick Mahomes, who's second in the league at 87.7. Jared Allen, who's second in the league at 87.1. Russell Wilson, who's fourth in the league at 82.8. That means the way that those guys are playing, 82.8% of the time the Seattle Seahawks will win. 87.1% of the time, the Buffalo Bills will win. 87.7% of the time, the Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs will win. And 92.8% of the time, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers will win. That is the point of the stat. It will combine all of those things, and their level is so much higher. These are Hall of Fame numbers. These are like some of the greatest seasons to ever be had right now are the 4 numbers that I just listed off by those quarterbacks, and they are key telling as to why they're so great.
I think with passer rating, why maybe some people have kind of doubts about it or they don't trust it. I think one, the the top number is just such a random number. What you said is like it's 158.3 or something
Right.
like that.
Where does it even come from?
Yeah, you're just like, why isn't it just like 100 or 200? You know, it's not a round number, so it's kind of weird. And then, like you described, you could go 22 for 25 and have a quote unquote perfect passer rating, and you're like, okay, well, that's not perfect. You had 3 incompletions, you know. So I think, you know, those are maybe some reasons why, you know, people kind of didn't trust that stat. I do think if you look at the list of, you know, who are the top guys as far as QBR, how it reads out does pretty much read like the top quarterbacks in the league right now, right?
Absolutely.
One thing that does stand out though, with QBR, and I don't know if you could explain this, is like, okay, Tom Brady is below Gardner Minshew right now in QBR. Tom Brady's below Matt Ryan. He's below Baker Mayfield and Ryan Fitzpatrick. And so you go to your average fan, and you're like, well, those guys aren't better than Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's not. He doesn't seem like he's playing terrible this year. So why is Tom Brady's QBR lower than theirs?
So a lot of that too, like I said, it adds so much context. So let's keep in mind too at this point, right, when you're looking at this. So the reason, Matt, and honestly, if you followed it closely enough, it does make sense. Matt Ryan is easily, especially because he's really not playing the worst. It's not like this is his worst season ever. He's just got a defense who can't close.
Yeah.
He absolutely has kept them in games. His play is more
he's putting up points, right?
Absolutely, right? Whereas, so like Tom Brady, he had a great game this last week, right? But again, for, you know, the context that comes into it is you know, let's, for instance, like a huge boost for Russell Wilson's QBR was on that 4th down when they needed a go-ahead score, and he bombs it to DK Metcalf. What was that, week 2, right? Whereas Tom Brady, he has definitely scored some points, but let's also keep in mind his defense is, I mean, it's one of the best in the league. Right. So it's not like Tom Brady's in these absolute shutouts where these guys are scoring, you know, 35, 40 points on his defense, and he's having to keep them in it. And so, again, when you add that context, right, into it to understand that, you know, he also, yes, he's putting up major points and everything, but he's also like, I wouldn't be hard pressed to say that if you were to put, let's say, I'm going to just pull a name off of here. Let's say Justin Herbert, with the way Justin Herbert's been playing. If you were to put Justin Herbert on that Tampa Bay team right now, and take his exact play for this year, right? Same stats, same scenario, whatever the case. And like, yes, I think you could argue that he would have Tampa Bay at the very least in the same exact scenario that they're in right now. You know what I mean? If not slightly better. But at the very least, the same exact scenario. Because when you put together, I mean, the guy, Tom Brady, has weapons all over the place. He's got Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Rob Grant. And I understand that, like, they've been hurt, you know, but they've also got Leonard Fournette, Shaq Barrett on the defensive side, all these things. So that's what makes it so great, right? So, you know, when you've got a guy that has an offense stacked like that, he can't get all of the credit, right? All the great things that have been done when you've got amazing personnel who also are making great, amazing things happen, and who maybe deserve more of the kudos for it, you know, with a great offensive line in front of you and great quarterbacks, etc. I mean, just based off of that, it's telling you that, like, yes, Tom Brady is playing above average, but I mean, it's also because of, look at the team that he's got, you know, look at what I totally had a brain fart. Winston. Look what he did with that team. You know what I mean? And the coaching staff and the talent and the defense, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so, yes, Tom Brady is playing better than average, and that's all that team needs. But that's where some of that context comes in when watching the games. And so it just kind of – and it opens your vision a little bit. You know, when you start following QBR, then it allows you to open your vision past a little more than just honing in on the quarterback and seeing how he's playing. It allows you to watch, you know, how well are they really blocking? How well are the receivers finding cushions and running their routes? How well is the running back blocking or chip blocking or running his route, or et cetera? I mean, it expands your entire vision of the field. And then once you do that and you start really understanding those X's and O's, then you start understanding the difference between why Herbert's QBR is here and Tom Brady's QBR is there.
Okay. All right. So if you go and look at the list of QBR right now, two of the quarterbacks who are in the top 7 are actually going to face off this Sunday. Patrick Mahomes for Kansas City, he's ranked 2nd in the league in QBR, and Derek Carr from the Raiders is ranked 7th in the league. So if you want to see some, you know, possibly high quality quarterback play this week, you're going to get that with the Chiefs and the Raiders game. Now I'll use that game to kind of transition into my segment, which another one that we introduced last week, where I'm going to talk about. Outside of this sports thing, including this sports thing, like my favorite thing in the world right now. I've got my 2 twin boys. They're about to turn 4 months old, and you know, one thing that I'm looking forward to doing with them when they're old enough is to talk about sports and tell them stories about sports, kind of like my dad did with me, right? This kind of fostered my love of sports, was my dad telling me about athletes and teams and, you know, sports moments that really had an impact on him. And that kind of led me to want to play sports and led me to being a fan and eventually led me to being, you know, in sports media. So that's what, you know, I want to, you know, take a segment of the show each week and just talk about things that are happening in sports, or, you know, athletes, you know, past and present, that I'm going to tell my kids about when they're old enough. So this Chiefs Raiders game coming up, right, made me think of some of the great players who have come through in this rivalry. It's one of the oldest, you know, classic NFL rivalries. You know, I remember my dad telling me stories because the Raiders were his team. You know, he's a Seattle native, but before the Seahawks, you know, were established as the expansion team, his team was the Raiders, right? So, you know, he told me about, you know, Cliff Branch and Jack Tatum and Glenn Dawson and Willie Lanier,
Dave
these,
Casper,
you know,
and all those guys.
These guys that were stars in that Chiefs Raiders rivalry. And I was thinking about the guys that kind of stood out in that rivalry to me when I was younger. And one guy who came up was Marcus Allen. So you know him as a running back, one of the greatest running backs of all time. He actually played quarterback and defensive back when he was in high school. He was recruited to USC to play defensive back, you know, and this might be, you know, another story for another podcast, but you kind of have to wonder how history might be different if, you know, back in the late 70s when Marcus Allen was coming up, if more black players were given chances to play quarterback. You know, if Marcus Allen had gone to college as a quarterback, and, you know, would he have gone to the NFL? You know, how would that change things? So anyway, but like I said, that's another story. So Marcus Allen, he gets to USC, and, you know, they move him to running back. They move him from defensive back to running back. As a freshman, he backed up Charles White. As a sophomore, they moved him to fullback, and Marcus Allen actually paves the way for Charles White to win a Heisman Trophy. So junior year, Marcus Allen finally gets the starting tailback job at USC. And he's, you know, great from the start. As a senior, he rushes for over 2,300 yards, wins the Heisman Trophy, like one of the greatest college football seasons of all time. Then Marcus Allen goes pro, gets drafted to the Los Angeles Raiders at the time. In his first 4 years in the league, he wins Rookie of the Year. He rushed for over 1,000 yards in 3 of those 4 years. He wins the league MVP. He wins Super Bowl. He wins MVP. All in the first 4 years of his career, right? So Marcus Allen is killing it. One of the best players in the league, if not the best player in the league. But then Bo Jackson. And we know Bo Jackson is one of the greatest pure athletes of all time. I mean, you can't bring Bo Jackson onto your team as a running back and not give him the ball and not feature him, right? But you have Marcus Allen. So what do the Raiders do? They move Marcus Allen back to fullback, just like when he was in college. And he's blocking and splitting carries with Bo Jackson, right? Now, if you're playing Madden, or in our day, you're playing Tecmo Bowl, but you're dealing with real people and there's egos involved. And, Marcus Allen's like, yo, I was league MVP, rushing for 1,000 yards a year. And now I'm kind of like I'm a fullback, I'm a backup tailback. Like, what's going on here, right? But he sucks it up. He does what his coaches ask him to do, and he makes it work, right? Now, and this was, keep in mind, this was before the current era where almost every NFL team is doing a running back by committee. Like back in the, late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, you had your guy. You had your workhorse.
Right, yeah. It was they call it like the bell cow running back, right? Well, most teams had that. Yeah, one guy got, 20-something carries a game. And, then you had clear divisions between him and the backup and the fullback.
In a very run-heavy league, too. I mean, very run-heavy.
Right. So this was more of a demotion as opposed to like, oh, well, we just have two backs and it's a committee type of thing like you would see today. So while all this is going on, Allen is feuding with Raiders owner Al Davis, mostly over his contract. And this feud, it got really ugly. They were kind of nasty accusations going back and forth. Marcus Allen, would say that he thought Al Davis was out to get him. Al Davis was out to ruin his reputation. So that basically leads to this breakup between, the player and the organization. In 1993, Marcus Allen, he's a free agent, and he signs with the Kansas City Chiefs, which is the Raiders' rival, right? His first year in Kansas City. And at this point, a lot of people were thinking Marcus Allen's washed up. So he goes to Kansas City. His first year with Kansas City, leads the league in touchdowns. He wins comeback player of the year, and he helps them get to the AFC title game. And I didn't look this up, but I would imagine there's not too many guys, if anyone, that have won MVP and comeback player of the year in the same career, right?
No.
Yeah, like that's rare.
I couldn't tell you who might have done it before or after or whatever, but that's insane.
Yeah. So Marcus Allen's last season in the league, he's 37 years old. He scored 11 touchdowns for Kansas City. And I think still now style, and then, he's put together obvious Hall of Fame career. He's in the Hall of Fame now. As far as style, Marcus Allen was fast, but he didn't look very fast. It wasn't like Tyreek Hill where he's just blazing, right. But like he just had,
or even Barry Sanders,
Yeah, he just had this stride. Yeah, he just had this gait, and it's just nobody. He was very rarely caught from behind, even though he didn't look like this, track star type of speed. He had moves, but it wasn't Lamar Jackson. It wasn't like, Madden joystick shakes. It was just like little subtle, smooth moves that got him away from a defender. He's one of the best goal line backs ever. Maybe the best goal line back ever, but it's not like he was Marshawn Lynch. He wasn't just trucking everybody, running everyone over. It was just he found the holes of the defense, and he had like a nose for the end zone, as they would say. Just tough, smart, just this complete football player. And when or if, because my fiance is going to have some say in this. If my boys play, if my boys play football and they want to be running backs, I'm going to show them and try to teach them to be like a back like Marcus Allen. That's right. A complete running back. He runs, he can catch, he can block. He's kind of the model of what you want in a running back. And Marcus Allen's going to be an athlete that I'm going to tell my kids about. So
that's awesome, man. God, I love hearing about that. That's so cool.
Yeah. All right. So our next segment is going to be our sibling rivalry segment, where we're going to bring in Dylan Holloway. This is Austin's brother. They went back, as if you watched last week, they went back and forth on a few topics. And after that, what we want you to do as a listener is go into the comments section and tell us who you thought won the arguments between them. So Dylan, if you didn't watch last week, he's a aspiring sports journalist. Although people are kind of aspiring to to do that. And, he's probably better than some of the people that call themselves official sports journalists. So I'll put that out there. So
send all your hate mail to Amar's Twitter at.
Or send to Dylan's Twitter at Dylan Reports, DILLON Reports. And if for the people who didn't watch last week or they missed your segment last week, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Well, like you said, my name is Dylan. I go to Rutgers. I see the giant R on my hat, RU, in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm originally from Washington State, obviously, same hometown as Austin. Grew up a fan of football, basketball. Not as big a fan of baseball as Austin, but I followed a little bit. I'm going for my bachelor's degree now. I got my associate's degree down in San Antonio, Texas. I covered a bunch of stuff down there, writing for the school paper, doing photographs, covered basketball for the men's and women's teams, boxing, natural sciences, spot news, which for you non-journalists out there is kind of news on the spot. Like we had one story where in the math building, a raccoon burst from the ceiling that had been living up there, and they needed a reporter to go down there and do a story on it. So I just love the writing process. I love journalism and I love sports. So I wanted to combine the two together, and that's what I'm doing here.
I think, and I've got a journalism degree too, and I feel like all of us, when we chose to get in this business, we thought, I want to story about raccoon through the ceiling.
Exactly.
And tell that story well. Yeah, exactly.
You might cut out, but I'm going to agree with whatever you just said right there.
Yep.
So we're going to get into these questions for Austin and for Dylan to go back and forth about. So the first one is Earl Thomas, former Seattle Seahawks, Baltimore safety, not on a team right now. There was a lot of talk before the season that he would hook up with someone, and he just hasn't. So the question is, do you think Earl Thomas is done, or is he going to play again?
Go ahead and take the lead on this one, Dylan.
Well, I think he will play again. The thing about it is I know he's had some off-the-field issues, but there have been a lot of players that have had off-the-field. The season wasn't his best season. It was a little bit of disappointment down over there in Baltimore. They didn't get quite where they wanted. He wasn't the game changer they expected, but he is still one of the better safeties in the NFL, and he's still definitely one of the better free agents out there. I don't think anybody can question that in terms of what's on the waiver wire. And I think the biggest reason that I think he'll play again is some team will get desperate enough and they'll take a chance on Earl Thomas. For a few reasons. One is he's still got talent, like I said, and two, he's a big name free agent, and a lot of teams that holds a lot of water with them, especially if once we get maybe a couple injuries in the season, maybe if a team's defense just is not up to snuff and they want to change some things up. One team that Earl Thomas, he went to school there in Austin, University of Texas at Austin. He had that infamous moment in the playoff game afterwards where he ran up to Dallas head coach Jason Garrett, and he said, "Come and get me," and then he kind of walked it back a little bit, and he said, "No, if I'm a free agent, come and get me." Well, we know he wants to play there, and I think Jerry Jones, we can all agree he likes his superstars, he likes his big names, he likes making a splash, and if Dallas's defense continues to play as bad as it is, because the offense is cranking it out right now. Dak is playing out of his mind, but he kind of has to. That's the flow of the game, is it seems like they're always behind, right? They're behind against the Falcons. They were behind against the Browns, and they came back. Then they come. Maybe if Earl Thomas is on that team, Odell Beckham doesn't just take it 50 yards to the house. Maybe Earl Thomas isn't the same Earl Thomas from 2013, but he's still a pretty good player, I think. And the Cowboys have been known to take flyers on players with trouble in the past. Remember Greg Hart at the defensive end. He got in a lot of trouble off the field. Dallas was thin at the defensive end position. They signed Greg Hardy. I'm not saying Earl Thomas is going to play for another 10 years, but I think he will play again. I think it's too big of a risk to say Earl Thomas will never play again. He's not 50 years old, right? He's still got some left in the tank. And I think he's still got a lot to offer a team.
So, Austin, you think Earl Thomas is done?
Yes, absolutely. And I know it definitely is. The safer pick is for sure that he will find a team because, Dylan, you're absolutely right. Some teams going to deal with a massive amount of injury issues. Some teams going to deal with just such horrendous play by its current personnel that they might feel that they need that injection. But here's why I don't think he will. When an 0-4 Texans team who just fired its head coach, didn't it fire most of its coaching staff? Well, anyways, its head coach and its GM, who is in desperate need of defensive help, when they all band together and say, nah, we're good, that's pretty troubling times, right? And you're right. Dallas has been linked to Earl Thomas numerous times, even when he was still in a Seahawks uniform. And guess what? He's still not wearing a star on his helmet. Why? Because they don't want him. And the reality is Pete Carroll and John Schneider. See, a lot of people will have pointed one thing out to me, and that's, man, you haven't really heard anything about Earl Thomas until, you know, his fiasco this offseason, what he dealt with Baltimore, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the key problem to that deal. Pete Carroll and John Schneider have always preached so much about keeping things in-house. That's why we didn't even find out about Percy Harvin punching Golden Tate in the eye and him having a black eye until how long after the Super Bowl? You know what I mean?
Never been confirmed officially, by the way.
Exactly, exactly. And so,
that's
like, they have
technically a rumor.
Right. So and that's my point is that when you have a team like that they keep everything in house as much as they do, then no, you're not going to hear all of the problems and issues that Earl Thomas may have brought. Right. And so when you combine all of that with the fact that Roger Goodell, the owners as a whole, and the NFL as a league has decided to put their foot down, say enough is enough. We don't want to deal with these guys that are beating their wives, cheating on their wives, bringing bad name and bad juju to the NFL. That you know, all of these issues compounded on. Look at Aldon Smith. The guy's playing out of his mind, and it took him how long to finally get a chance again? Now again, saying
but he did get a chance, right?
Exactly, and saying Earl Thomas will never play again is a huge risk. But I think he falls into that fiasco of, does the talent match or exceed the drama that he's going to bring? And I just think it doesn't. And I think, again, when you have a winless team that is in as dire straits as the Texans, just to get a veteran presence, a championship caliber veteran presence in there to just inject some new life into that team, and they're all getting together and saying, we want nothing to do with this guy. Like, that's just pretty telling, you know, that we're not going to see him suit up again.
Now, I agree that the thing with the Texans was pretty surprising. We don't know the full extent of how that went, though. What they said was they had some players vote. We don't know if every player voted. We don't know if all the coaches voted. And the thing is, we don't really know what's going on in Houston anyways, right? I think that kind of
maybe their poor decision making is the exact reason.
They gave away, I'm not saying passing on Earl Thomas is a huge mistake, but they gave away DeAndre Hopkins for nothing. They gave away Clowney for almost nothing. Like, I wouldn't say that, oh, Houston doesn't want him, so obviously he's never going to play again. There's still 31 other teams, right? So I think that there's a pretty good chance. Now, I'm not saying he's definitely going to have a team, you know, next week. There's a pretty good chance, especially if we see some injuries, which we've been seeing a lot of injuries so far during this season, where we had no training camps, no OTAs, no preseason, right? Teams are going to start to get thin in the secondary position, and, you know, winning kind of cures everything. Winning is over everything. So
right, and I just think you get to a point where, and again, obviously we won't hang on this too long, but man, it's not like this guy just like last minute got cut by his team 30 minutes before kickoff of week 1. You know what I mean? Like, he's been out there. He's been a free agent for how long now, and we've still dealt with it. Even without the injuries, I think that his play last year in Baltimore, although it wasn't, you know, he wasn't the best safety in the league like we've seen in years past, I think it was good enough to warrant that, like, hey, this guy's still got talent and he can still do something for our defense regardless of who it is. And so I just think it's pretty telling that man, there has been injuries, and here we are 4 weeks into the league, or into the week, or going into 5 weeks into the season, and teams are literally turning him away. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy to me.
One team so far that we
can confirm. Who's to say that, you know, agent hasn't dabbled the waters in a few other teams, especially Dallas, and they're like, nah, I think we're good right now. You know, that's just the stories that we don't hear.
I wonder how much of it has to do with the fact that he plays safety, which is a position that some people say is kind of undervalued now, kind of like a running back, right? If he was like a pass rusher or a quarterback or a corner, a position where there's so much more demand, would he get a shot? Because, you know, every team wants a pass rusher, every team wants a corner, every team wants a quarterback. So that's something to think about.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question. We're starting to see with the NFL, the games are being postponed. They're being lost due to the COVID pandemic. Do you think that? So far, the season's mostly gone according to plan. But do you think that we're gonna still have a complete NFL season despite the COVID pandemic?
I'll go first. I think we do. I think no matter what, we end up having a full, 17 weeks of the NFL. And the biggest reason being is money. We watched how hard people pushed for basketball to be brought back, and now nobody's even watching it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm watching it too. Obviously we are, but like your casual everyday fan,
I know some people say no one's watching it, but I'm watching it.
Right. Right. Well, point proven. No, I'm just kidding. But ratings are in the toilet. And so, but when it comes to football, like basketball, though it's becoming more popular, it's still a bit of a niche sport to some. It's not as wide. Like everybody loves football. Everybody watches football. Everybody will tune in week after week after week. At least more people. You have a larger base of audience that will tune in all 17 weeks of the NFL and be engaged. And it's, you know what I mean? That's when the family gets together, everything. And so my point is that when you start getting into the nuances of ad revenue and slowly teams are trying to bring people into the stands and everything else, I think that there's just no way that the owners especially will allow for they will find a workaround. For every 16 teams could all be infected with COVID, and they'll find a way to break that up so that we can still have a full regular schedule of football, playoffs and Super Bowl included, even if it takes us 450 days to do it.
Now, if the season took 450 days, does that really count as a typical NFL season? I'd say that would prove my point. And I want to preface this to say that, I'm obviously not a doctor, not a medical expert, not a scientist, right? This is just my journalistic opinion based on what we've seen thus far with the NBA, how that's gone with the bubble, and what we've seen thus far with the first handful of weeks with the NFL. And I think it's going to be very tough for the NFL to do a regular season without a hitch due to the coronavirus pandemic because of what we've seen so far. Like the first 3 weeks went great and everyone was excited, like only Jacksonville in the first week had some fans in the stands, which is ironic, I think everybody can say, right? And I think everybody was excited about like, oh, football's back, it's going to go great, like NFL is taking lots of precautions, don't get me wrong. Like they're going to spend $75 million just on testing. That's a lot of tests, right? And they're doing tests every day except for game day because they're doing the tests with the quickest turnaround time, right? NFL's taking this very serious, and I take my hat off to them for doing so. There's my floppy hair. But anyways, I'm afraid of how it's going to go because so far there's been 20 members of the Tennessee Titans that have been infected, and that's already affected one game, the Steelers and the Titans, and it messed up their bye week, and they postponed the game, and now more players for the Titans are getting infected, and the next game with the Titans and the Bills is in question, and this is just one team. Now imagine if multiple players, multiple staff members, multiple teams, you can only postpone games for so long, right? You start to run out of weeks. You can't have a 450-day NFL season. I don't think that's realistic. And I don't think it's realistic to go, hey, let's just throw them all in an NFL bubble. The NBA spent $150 million just to get the bubble started, right? Just to get everything going. The playing at Disney, the 3 arenas, the testing, all the staff. Well, the NFL has a lot more players and a lot more moving parts. An NBA roster maximum is 17 players. NFL roster on game day is 53 players. Coaching staff is a lot bigger. To do a bubble with a hotel that could hold all those players and staff and have a location with multiple football arenas all within close proximity to keep players from getting infected and infecting others, I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think we can see that. And I'm not saying for sure like the NFL season's going to end. I think it's just going to be very tough for them to have a regular 16, 17 game schedule, everything without a hitch, and I think they're going to see some It's going to get a lot worse. That's what I think. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. I think this is just the start. Green Bay's already announced that indefinitely they're not going to have fans. I saw an article right before we went on here that the Florida governor said the Miami Dolphins can have up to 65,000 fans at games again, which is ridiculous to me because at last I checked, the coronavirus is still a thing, right? The Dolphins announced we're only going to have 13,000 fans the next game. But like you said, owners like money, and I think the temptation will be too strong. And then we might see another outbreak. Like you said, the owners aren't going to allow it to happen. It might not be up to them eventually. If we have another major shutdown, if we have another, where everything just locked down again, do you think they're going to let them just keep playing football? I don't think that that's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to be up to the NFL owners or the players. As much as I want to see football happen, you got to think the coronavirus isn't going to take a day off, right? It doesn't care, who throws touchdowns or how much money they make or anything like that. Coronavirus just don't give a crap, just like honey badger. It might go very bad before it gets a lot better. So
I just think the NFL finds a workaround one way or another. Roger Goodell, those owners, they've got all the money, all the power. They shake all the right hands, and whether it's right. They bump all the right fists, but no matter what, they will find some way somehow to make sure that we have a full season of football, the playoffs, the Super Bowl.
Do you think it's going to be a regular season like a typical NFL season, or do you think they're going to have to do some kind of bubble? Maybe not quite like the NBA bubble, but something like that.
I think moving into the playoffs, yes, they will find some way to incorporate that to a degree, and who knows if that's just finding, if week to week or game to game, finding just a neutral field, right, that each team can fly into, spend 2 weeks at a hotel quarantining, getting testing every single day, and then play your game, right, and then move on to the next round, because you're dealing with your wild card, your divisional, your conference championship, and then the Super Bowl. You have 4 weeks of it,
We're having an extra playoff game.
Right. And, oh, yeah, you're right. So call it 5 weeks of it.
Yeah.
So I think even if they take the time to set aside 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks, give everybody a time to quarantine, and then just kind of go that route. Maybe you turn that 5 weeks into 8 weeks, possibly, right? Just to give a little bit more time for travel or whatever the case, if you want them to have any kind of real shutdown or bubble-esque, if that makes sense, but yeah, I mean, I don't think we have a normal playoff or finish to the season by any means.
The other thing is the coronavirus could, and it already is, potentially hurt the product on the field. Like if anybody watched, and I know I did because I watch everything, the Chiefs and the Patriots, there was no Cam Newton.
Right.
Who was excited to see Brian Hoyer come out in prime time, followed by Stidham, right? And it showed. It really hurt them. They had 1 touchdown between the 2 quarterbacks and 4 turnovers. They lost that game. And I think we can all say if they had Cam Newton, maybe they wouldn't have won, but it would have been a lot better. And it would have been a lot better game. And I'm sure some people didn't even tune in because Cam Newton wasn't playing. They're like, oh, I don't want to see that. So what if that continues to happen? Other star players go down. Is it even worth continuing the season if there's no fans in the stands and the ratings are in the crapper because, we've got like Joe Flacco is leading a playoff team or something. You know what I mean? Like who's excited to see that?
Well, you're going to get to a point where the finals will be over, the World Series will be over, and at the end of the day, I mean, people want to watch sports, and especially one of those 3 big sports. And so, yes, I think there could be a tipping point for that, but I think it's got to be such a far tipping point that we don't see it,
Well, I'll just say if the NFL season gets shut down today, my Cleveland Browns are 3-1, so that's pretty much like Super Bowl parade material.
Yes.
Like, yeah, we're talking like, yeah, we're handing out. I mean, we're handing out rings. We're gonna do a parade. Like 3-1. That's like the best season the Browns have had since
they're going to the playoffs. I'm telling
you.
And
if they end the season tomorrow and they just expedite to the playoffs and the Browns are 3-1 and get to the playoffs, there's no way that counts as me losing the last game.
Right.
I'm sorry, but I think there should be some kind of asterisk if the Browns make the playoffs with a 3-1 record.
No asterisk.
Sorry.
That's
no
legit.
asterisk.
Yep.
We don't do that.
So, so the last, topic we'll give you guys. You've probably, I'm sure one of us has said one of these throughout the show. I mean, they're so natural for me, I don't even notice them anymore. What are the worst sports cliches to you guys?
For me, I thought about this quite a bit because there's so many, like you said, and I was like even thinking about it, I'm like, well, that one's not so bad. That one's pretty bad. And the one that I think jumped out at me that I thought of was when people say you can't leave it into the hands of the officials, and that kind of drives me nuts for a big reason. Like on the outside, that kind of makes sense, But then when you really think about it, it's like what you're saying there is you have to dominate your opponent so much because there's a pretty good chance you might get screwed over by a bad call and lose the game that way. And the thing is, no other like position or job do they use that terminology. No one's like, man, he's like, you better go into that doctor's office healthy because you don't want to leave your health in the hands of that doctor. Woo-hoo, boy. Yeah. Or that brain surgeon, or you don't want to leave it in the hands of the politicians. Maybe they say that sometimes now, but that's another story. But these guys are they're NFL and NBA referees for a reason because they're supposed to be the best in the world at their job. So to have a built-in excuse for them, kind of drives me nuts a little bit.
I feel like that's something that like we tell kids in youth sports because you don't want to teach them like responsibility and owning up and that kind of thing. But yeah, once you get to like the highest level and it's a game of inches and, one bad call or just a wrong call could like impact someone's whole season. I'm like, yeah, sometimes you're going to leave it in the hands of the officials, and that's what's
and professional games and even games at the college level can be really close.
Yeah,
not everything's going to be blowout, and we don't want everything to be a blowout, right?
Right.
Like you're going to have
how boring is that?
You're going to have games that are decided by big plays in crunch time, and when there's a referee, if a team is on that bad end of a call. Like people are like, oh, well, you shouldn't have left it in the hands of the official. It's like, what are you supposed to do at that point? If they call a foul or don't call a foul, that is not, that is not your fault. Like if Jimmy Butler's driving the hoop and he gets a call or he doesn't get a call, like that's not up to him. Yeah. It's the officials that have been hired by the machine, right?
And we're like, well, you should have been up by 20. It's not,
no kidding.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
In the real world, anyone who's played sports or been in a competition knows that you can't just go, oh, man, I should have just been up by 3 touchdowns instead. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, and that actually, so that plays a little bit into mine as well. Mine is they just wanted it more. That is the most ridiculous, stupid. I hate hearing that cliche. They just wanted it more. And that, yes, we've all been privy to seeing certain players who may have perceived to have given up or things like that or whatever. But the reality is that these guys have, in whatever major sport they're in, have worked their asses off, right, to get to this professional level, and they continue to every single day work their asses off, get up in the mornings, do their workouts, go to practices, beat the crap out of each other. Again, whether it's basketball, football, whatever, they're all competitive people, and they're working every single day to provide us with the best entertainment possible when they step out onto that court, field, whatever the case. And then so to sit there and say, well, the other guys just wanted it more. No, that's disregarding all of the hard work that the losing team put in, as well as not providing any context that should accompany that. When the game is won on some crazy football that was thrown and then bounced around off of 6 people's shoelaces and then somehow ended up in the receiver's pinky finger and it's a touchdown, and now, oh well, they just wanted it more. No, one cliche I'm a huge fan of is luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And when you prepare yourself and those opportunities present themselves and you make that kind of catch, yes, you are very lucky in that. And that's not a bad thing. But to say that another team just wanted it more, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. And sometimes as a team, you catch bad breaks and you do have bad luck, and it's just unfortunate. You know what I mean? But to sit there and just totally dehumanize these people and say, well, they just didn't want it. They didn't care. They didn't give a shit, obviously, and say that the other guys just wanted it more. Sorry, don't buy it.
Yeah, especially when a game ends, like you said, on like one crazy play.
Right.
Like,
and that reminds me of one of my least favorite, which is whenever we talk about this athlete has more heart than the next athlete. Like,
yes.
Russell Westbrook and I don't know, Tony Parker about even, but Westbrook has more heart. I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
it kills me.
Like, how do you measure that either?
Right. Yeah. Right. How do you measure that? It's just like, okay, he's louder on the court, or, he makes more mean faces, so he has more heart, or, he looks like he's, sweating more or something. Like, what, how do you determine who has more? How do you
quantify it? And that's
right, exactly. It's like the dumbest analogy.
But what I hate about that is whenever you bring up something like that, yes, there are absolute exceptions to the rules. There's obvious guys who didn't want it more, right? Or
here we go. Now he's walking it back.
No. I'm just saying, when you got guys that are, packing on, running backs that are packing on to 300 pounds or whatever in the off season, because like Eddie Lacy and shit, where teams are having to give them money incentives just to go to goddamn practice and lose weight. Right. I understand that. But when it comes down to it, all of these guys are professionals. They've all put in their blood, sweat, and tears to become a professional and get paid the money that they do to take care of their family for generations and generations. So to say that they just don't want it is, I still stand by that.
Or wanted it less than the other team.
Right, or wanted it less than the other guy. Yeah.
Somebody made a miraculous catch in the end zone as time expired.
Right.
Obviously, the players on the other team on different positions that weren't even on the field at the time didn't want it more.
Right.
Yep. It really doesn't make sense. Neither one makes sense. But what good thing to have your listeners and watchers is to not only vote on who won the debate here, not the debate on the other channels. Right. The debate here is to post what are your least favorite sports cliches in the comments down there. Be a good thing. I'd like to see those. So see if there's any that we missed. So
add those on. Tell us what are your least favorite and maybe some of your favorite sports cliches, and then tell us who you thought won. This round. I guess we'll say round 2 between Dylan and Austin for the Sibling Rivalry segment. So we're kind of running on time here. So Dylan, I'm gonna have you sign off until we see you probably next week, and we'll kind of go from there.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. I love sibling rivalries. I love bringing them on here and just giving them the business, bro. It's great.
It was cool because you guys get to keep in communication and talk regularly.
Right. Of course.
Of course. All right. So before we wrap this up, we're just going to hit real quick the cold takes segment. As I'll explain last week. So the way Austin and I met was actually in Facebook sports groups. And so one of the things that, we kind of, bonded over, connected over was laughing at some of the dumb things that you see people say in Facebook sports groups and some of the cold takes and the ridiculous memes and just the bad logic and just stupid arguments that people make. So we figured every week or every episode, we're going to share some of the worst takes that we've seen on social media or on, TV, ESPN, Fox Sports, whatever, from the last week. So do you got a cold take for us this week?
Yes. Heat and 6. Heat and 6. That's the coldest take that the mass majority of America put out there. It's not even just, you can't name one person in general, because guess what? Going into game 1 of the NBA Finals, Heat and 6 was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. That means that the majority of you people out in the Twitter sphere was out there saying Heat and 6. Get real. And that, the problem, that the reason why it's such a ice cold take for me is because like this is what social media has it constantly does, right? You get these little like, maybe a handful of people said it seriously, and then some people said it jokingly, and then it just spreads like this wildfire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes this narrative. And like, and people lose all sense of logic and understanding, and it becomes like you don't know who to take serious and who not. But there's people that are arguing that like the Heat were actually going to take this series in 6. Get real. Get real. Like, you know what I mean? If you want to say it satirically or jokingly or hey, I think that there could be an opportunity for, I will graciously accept that. But to sit here and try to argue that the Heat were actually going to win this series in 6 when they really weren't even supposed to be there in the first place, right, against LeBron James and Anthony Davis and everybody else on that team with all the championship experience, with everything, like I said, when you actually put logic and reason behind it, yes, the Heat in 6 being the number one trending topic on Twitter going into game 1 of the finals is an absolute cold take, and you guys should all be ashamed for saying it.
So mine, and this is going to hit on a player that I know you're going to have something to say about this. So even with my weekly segment about sports things I'm going to tell my kids about, which is, kind of a nostalgic segment, or, we talk about some past, as well as some present. I'm a big proponent of not falling for that narcotic of nostalgia and not, being so starry-eyed about the past that you can't see flaws in athletes that you grew up watching, guys from the golden era, whatever you consider that to be, and to give respect to the current athletes, right? And to give respect to the younger generation and the ones that came, after your generation. So with that said, I do think there's a lot of people that don't give enough credit to the past, don't give enough credit to the old athletes, especially ones that they didn't really see, right? And they don't really know that much about them. So cold take I saw this week was somebody said that Karl Malone wouldn't be that good of a player today because he couldn't run the floor and keep up with today's big men. Now, if there is one thing that I would say about Karl Malone, if you put him in today's game, is physically he could hang. He could keep
without
up.
a doubt.
He would be people have asked, if you did like this all-time NBA one-on-one tournament, who would win? One name I always mention is Karl Malone, right?
Oh yeah.
Because if you watch people play one-on-one when it gets like really serious, when like there's, something on the line, it's ugly. It's not, crossovers and like fancy moves. It's like back you down, like, ugly, nasty, physical, you have a post-up game, you have the strength to like, go back to the basket. And if you have a mid-range jumper, then like your money. And Karl Malone had all that. I think Karl Malone, you put him up against any NBA player in history in a one-on-one situation, and he's going to do work, right? And the other thing he could do on top of that was he could run, and he was in amazing like physical shape. And he got so many of his points beating guys down the floor, running the floor, using his athleticism, speed, and conditioning, because he was still doing it in the fourth quarter.
And for those of you who don't know, I actually used to work for Karl Malone. Mm-hmm. I attended his 50th birthday party. Mm-hmm. And even at 50 years old, that dude was in incredible shape, to the point where I even told him, I was like, Karl, you probably go lace up your sneakers right now and drop an average 10 a night.
Yeah.
And he just laughed at me and he's like, no way. And I'm like, I guarantee it, Karl, don't play with me like that.
Yeah. So I'm just like, so someone to say like Karl Malone couldn't hang in today. Now, if you want to say, in this stretch 4 era, the way he played for his position to be a little outdated or whatever, that's fine. You can say that. But to say that like he couldn't keep up physically or athletically or with the speed or whatever, like That's crazy. Like Karl Malone was a beast, and Karl Malone could run for
athletic.
He could run for days, and he would be beating these guys down the floor like in today's
easily.
Game. So yeah. All right. So that's our cold takes. That's pretty much what we got for this week. So you want to take us out of here?
Absolutely, guys. Again, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Austin Snyder 90. Also, don't forget to follow Amar at
Amar_206.
And thank you guys so much. Just remember, every time you come to this show, you better bring your A game. Have a good night, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like button, turn on notifications, and until next time.
All right.